Now, let's get back to the country and back to the gang.
All right. Yes, Yvonne, the news gang is here. And tonight, who will sleep in that famous bedroom? The votes, the stones, and the stories from Kibra. Also on the show, the Maraga rant and the miracle. Who says there is no money in Kenya? Plus, who's the judge now? We look at the case the president has against nominees to the Court of Appeal. We also have the kicker, the take, the punchline, and the angle. And the memo for tonight is that Jamila is away. She'll be back next week, hopefully. So, ladies and gentlemen, interesting developments in Kibra. Gashuri, what are you seeing so far?
So far, I think it's probably the right place to call it. Looking at the figures that are coming from various quarters, interestingly, both Jubilee and ODM had tallying centers, and the indications that you're getting from both camps is that Imran Okoth has taken this one. And I will not be surprised if in the course of this news gang, McDonald Mariga calls in to concede.
Yes, actually, it's interesting because the body language and the tone of the Jubilee MPs, some of them we listened to not too long ago, they all say, well, you know, it was a good fight, and, you know, we came into someone's bedroom, and, you know, we had a candidate who we campaigned for it just, I don't know how many weeks they said it was. And so you almost get this sense that they are getting ready for something, but they are saying, well, we are coming out of these shoulders high, Linus.
Yes, I think it's really interesting the turn it's taken, particularly because for the first time there is no electronic transmission of results, which would have enabled all the parties to sit where you are and project the results. The results have been coming in different ways. There have been setups of private tallying processes. I think Jubilee has its own, ODM has its own, and they all know what's going on. From the body language of those politicians, they seem to suggest that they know the result and they know the outcome. You know, one would have expected this to take long because of the reintroduction of the manual, very manual transmission. And by this manual, the IEBC had explained that the returning officers from each polling station must go back to the tallying center with their original copies before the results are announced.
Okay, great. And Yvonne, just looking at how this whole thing has gone, I mean, looking at the kind of contest campaigns and everything that we saw, and then today in the morning we saw a little bit of that tension manifesting in forms that were somewhat violent in some instances. Yeah,
and I wonder if we can take a look at some of the footage from earlier today. What I found interesting was there was when two members of National Assembly from Jubilee were speaking to us a little earlier. It started off with KJ, Honorable KJ, who then said, you know, it was largely peaceful. Then Aaron Cheriot came in after and said, you know, there was widespread violence. I found that an interesting contradiction, but there were some pockets of violence. I mean, we saw live on television what took place between Simba Arati, the Member of Parliament, and Didmas. Yeah. I mean, you know, there was a show of that. We're seeing images of rocks being carried by former MP and Senator Honorable Boni Halwale. So there have been some incidents, as well as allegations of voter bribery that are there, and well, I guess it wasn't largely violent. I think there were just some pockets of violence, and you can see some of that there. And this was the point at which the said individual was alleged to have been engaged in some voter bribery that was there, even getting the police to just rescue the individual and take them away. Typical of that. What is also interesting is the turnout, and I don't know if Gashuri, you know.
Oh, look at it! Look at
that.
That's Halwale.
Yes, this was the incident I was talking about with Halwale, and I mean, this was like, look at that.
But really unfortunate. Yes. I mean, looking at where we have come as a country, but also, I mean, Kibra, I think, was uncharacteristic in many ways throughout this campaign period. It wasn't a violent the campaign that many people expected. There were, of course, skirmishes here and there once in a while.
There was the one person who died,
but it was largely, one would say, a peaceful campaign. And so to come to polling day and you see these sorts of things coming up in the morning, it's something that I think we need to be concerned about as a country. I mean, we can't have in 2019 people resolving whatever differences they have.
And it's a by-election, and they're supposed to resolve their issues at the
members of parliament running around, being chased around. I mean, I think that is a side of our politics that is quite shameful, to be honest.
It is unnecessary, but I also just want to add that before today, this was clearly high stakes election. And I wonder if we can go to the campaigns that took place before. In fact, the biggest rallies we had was on Sunday. And perhaps we'll get to those clips in a few. But there's a reason we're calling this the Kibra National By-Election. Because, Linus, this was a handshake election, there was a handshake candidate, there was a deputy president, getting involved in campaigning.
Even from time to time in our political history, there have been moments like this where a by-election, the stakes are raised so high that it becomes almost national in nature. And I want to illustrate with three examples. The first one is actually the one that made Raila Odinga member of parliament for NDP party way back in 1996. 95. Actually, 96, December. And he defected from Ford Kenya, which was the party that he got to parliament with. He defected from Ford Kenya and went to NDP and went to this...
After that very vicious disagreement with Wamalwa Kijana.
With Wamalwa Kijana? Yes, very vicious. That's, you remember the
Thika one where the stones were flying in,
So he goes into this election, which KANU immediately converted to a real high-stakes war. And the KANU candidate at the time was called Perez Olindo. And I covered this by-election. It was my first election, actually, to cover. And here was Perez Olindo enjoying, seemingly, state largesse. He had quite some money, and he had a lot of people accompanying him. You can see structure and power around him. That was 1996. Then we moved to Kipipiri. Actually, Kipipiri came before the Langata by-election. In Kipipiri, KANU decided this is a DP zone and they are going to get this seat.
Absolutely.
And what they did was to bring in this microwave development. I remember they took electricity poles, and put them all over the roads. You go to Kipipiri and there were electricity poles all over. The promise was you vote for KANU,
you get electricity.
You get electricity. But Mwangi Githiomi beat the KANU candidate hands down. Again, what was seen in Kipipiri was the hand of government. And then you go to Kieni.
Oh, and then they took away the polls.
They took away the polls immediately.
After KANU lost.
After the results, the polls were taken away. Now, you go to Kieni, and David Munene Cairo passes on. And again, KANU decides, this is a DP zone, we're going to go for this seat. Very high stakes. Lots of coverage, especially on the state broadcaster, and campaign was high octane. And who wins? It's Dr. Chris Murungaru, not very well known. And Nyeri had some KANU presence because of the people that were in those days in top positions, including Davidson Gibuine Kuguru. So the campaign was high stakes. So moments like this are really regular in our politics from time to time. But one last thing, just to paint the difference between Kibra and the rest. Kibra was not approached by Jubilee as the party in government. It is a faction of Jubilee that went to the Kibra by-election. I'll still have to get used to
Kibra and Kibra.
Yes. So Jubilee went into this as a faction and not as a party in government. Would it have made a difference if it had gone united? I think so. The margin would be, the results are not out, but the margin would have been tighter. When you have the party in government fighting, I mean, you can see the numbers already there, because there are a lot of the factors that went in, including what we politely call mobilization.
And Linus, I take it from where you you left it. You see, McDonald Mariga went into this race totally disadvantaged. Why? Because one, the party leader was lukewarm in his support and so sent a very wrong signal as to the authenticity of the candidature of one McDonald Mariga.
He gave him a cap.
And he capped his support for the guy.
Yeah, he capped his support
gave him a cap and then he...
And also, when the other Jubilee team went and disowned Mariga and opted to support Imran, therein were signs that this was not going to be very easy for Mariga. And then thirdly, the branding. You know, this brand about a project often disadvantages the person who gets that brand. So when he's branded a William Ruto project, it becomes a disadvantage for him. So when I listen to the members of parliament from Jubilee who are supporting Mariga say that we did better than we did in 2017, that was one line that I was expecting to hear all day.
It's a giveaway.
Yeah, we did better than we did in 2017.
And some would say that...
So that is the clearest signal that this is gone.
But some would say that right there probably gives an idea of why they were in this race in the first place. I mean, there are people who say, well, you know what, these people were not here to win the race. There's a certain point they wanted to make that, you know what, we can, put a candidate in any constituency we want, we can do this and
put up
that's
a decent
fight. And basically, if you think about it in the context of the election that is coming up in 2022, it's almost like a warning shot, like, hey, don't think you have everything in the bag.
And that is how it should be seen, Joe. This election was not about Kibra. It was not about the Kibra constituency. It was about other factors, including what is currently going on. First of all, there is the handshake of March 9th last year that separated the Jubilee principals, President Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto, and Raila Odinga right there in the middle. This was William Ruto's way of testing the waters. Take the battle to what now became known as the bedroom. I mean, in any home, I mean, bedroom is a no-go zone.
Don't play with that.
So, I think the Ruto team will have some satisfaction tonight of having caused some political anxiety. Even if
they actually turned it into a real contest, whereas it initially was supposed to be some kind of a walkover.
And it almost seemed like some sort of dress rehearsal, for 2022. Flex your muscle a little bit, just see what your resources can do, see how much you can flex your political muscle. And I heard some analysts saying that at least this for the deputy president was his way of getting his name in Nairobi constituency, Nairobi, as a voting block, as a county, and that now even in places like in Sarangombe and in Lindi and in the heart of Kibra, that the name is on people's lips, whether it is for one issue or another. So I think that will be interesting, and I wonder if the people of Kibra were considered in any way in everything that's happening. If you remember that last rally that I was talking about on Sunday, where Raila brought out everybody, and this was also, the deputy president's way of saying it may be a bedroom, but it's not going to be as easy as you think. Just basically taking the war to his doorstep. And you remember the lineup that we saw? I mean, Governor Waiguru, you had Governor Alfred Mutua, you had the big guns on one end. Kibwana was there, and Gilu was there. And then you had also on the side of Jubilee Party, or the faction, if you like, also having some big guns. But you notice also with them, it was a lot of the young people. There's Kimani Ichung'wah, there's Nixon Korir from Lang'ata next door. You have Honorable KJ. So it really was a galaxy of stars in Kibra. There was something interesting that was said. All those big crowds, where were they today with the turnout?
Well, the turnout was, let's say, a bit poor, because as at about 3 p.m., it was about 28.7%.
Wow.
For a
2 hours to closing?
Yeah, for a constituency of about 118,000 registered voters, that was too low a number. Compare that to the turnout in 2017, where Ken Okoth clocked over 60,000 votes against Doreen Wasike's about 10,000.
10,000.
That's about 70,000 plus in terms of the number of people who turned up to vote.
But I got to ask you, because typically by-elections are, low turnout.
No, but they still do 50,
yeah, but
60.
so what is the average turnout for a by-election?
I would suppose by now in Kibra will be about 40-45% at best. But we've seen in other by-elections where the stakes have been higher than probably, have been lower compared to the by-election in Kibra, and the turnout ended up being about 50% plus. So you would have expected the hype that was witnessed in the campaign rallies would have translated into higher turnout. But put it this way, a lot of the discussions were also not about Kibra. There were also very many discussions about things that will happen post-Kibra. And it is always important to listen to some of the things that some of the politicians say. I remember listening to Governor Anne Waiguru on Sunday saying, herein is Imran Okoth, the handshake candidate.
Shall we go now there? Dennis Waweru is speaking. Let's go to Kibra right away for a live statement. Speaking.
That one, I'm the only one who can translate.
Translation from Yvonne.
Yes.
Oh, come on. You're not playing.
No, at least I had
at least I had
that.
Yes. But I think we have two very competent people here in that language.
Yes, Joe by proxy.
In actual fact, it's only one. It's for the record. You know?
We'll go back there when we have something more.
So I was actually saying, listening to Governor Anne Waiguru on Sunday, she said something that I think ought to shape discussions moving forward, that this is the handshake candidate. Don't listen to any other person or any other thing they are saying. The other person she was talking about was obviously William Ruto. And then she said something even more interesting, that after this by-election, there will be the BBI. And BBI ndio itatoa rais wa 2022.
Yes.
So this by-election was not just about the people of Kibra, it was bigger than that.
She let the cat out of the bag, or the bag
out of the cat.
Yeah, but basically she was saying like this. I mean, for the first time we got glimpses of what this thing had been all about from the word God.
And I just want to say something about what Minor Commander is saying there. He's saying that the Kibra people have made us handshake team very happy, he says.
You see, Joe, you talk of the cat being let out of the bag. It was never in the bag in the first place. It's been roaming all over Kibra for the last few days, because how else do you explain the presence of politicians from other counties, the governors, the array of governors that was brought in? The only person who may not have interpreted the battle well is William Ruto. He didn't nationalize his team. He brought a smaller team compared to the other side that was in this contest. And this is because the stakes were so high for Raila Odinga than they are for William Ruto.
But he nationalized his campaigns by talking about Kibra in Nandi and other places. That actually also found very interesting.
Yeah, I'm talking about the team that he actually brought on the ground compared to what the handshake team did over the weekend. They went there visible to raise it beyond Kibra. It's not just about them. And Anne Waiguru lets out or belts the cat and says, this is about 2022. It's not about you guys only. Because the implications were going to be dire if, for example, ODM lost the race. Because what would it have meant for Raila Odinga? A disaster. This is a bedroom fight, and he has lost it. And you know very well the remarks that were made by William Ruto. What are the implications for Ruto? Had he won this seat, if we were a parliamentary system, he would call for an early general election.
Okay. I know we've said before on this show that NASA is dead and there's a mortician, but what does this mean for
the corpse of NASA?
Whatever is left of it. Ford Kenya had its own candidate, so did ANC. Wiper didn't. They say they're leaving it open with the possibility of Prezzo, the rapper, being on Atakuja Kuleta action, you know, in Kibra in 2022. But, you know, where does this leave NASA, if at all? I mean, either way, you know, whichever way this vote goes.
Well, I think Sifuna said it. He said that they'll finally bury these other people once the election is over. I think that, as you were saying, NASA has been dead for a while now. They've been kind of toying about with the corpse, perhaps hoping that it will resurrect. But I think any hopes of that ever happening were dashed in this election when everybody went out there, and it was not friendly fire. I mean, those were vicious, what do you call those things that artillery that was flying? That you actually needed to take cover because otherwise it would blow your head off.
Right.
If you look at the kind of things that Mudavadi was saying about Raila and vice versa, if you look at the viciousness of the entire campaign, in fact, it looked more like a NASA fratricide than actually something between Jubilee and NASA. I think the battle or the war of words that we saw between the NASA's so-called affiliate parties appeared at certain moments to be even more vicious than what we were seeing between Jubilee and ODM.
Okay.
I think as people can make an independent autopsy on this, we should try and get the death date right. And I don't think it's Kibra.
It's handshake.
It's not even handshake.
It's January
swearing
30th.
in January 30th.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
January
It's been said,
30th.
when those guys did not...
January 30th.
The
January
Nigerian
30th.
phone calls and things.
Yes.
When that Nigerian number couldn't go through,
I know,
whatever
that was it.
Yes.
Pronounced dead at that moment.
That was the day it was pronounced dead. So I think even our autopsy as a gang should be right.
But, and probably today was what many years ago was known as Matangazo ya Vifo. So today was Kifo cha Tangazwa cha. Yeah. So anybody probably who has harbored thoughts that probably there was an opportunity, I think Kibra has confirmed that it's totally dead. And not just because of fielding different candidates. No. Fielding different candidates and maybe engaging in some friendly fire is not a problem. But the nasty things that were said by each of the parties against the other, bear it all, some things that you would... you would not have expected them to say about each other because they were in a certain team, then confirms that it will be very, very difficult. And even showing that by the you are leaving, I'm replacing you with so-and-so, like instantly.
Coalitions also don't hold once the election results don't favor them. And that is the history of our politics. The first formation was actually the National Rainbow Coalition. And it went on very, very well until they went to office. When the gains of going to office were not shared equally, it broke down irretrievably. And way back, you look at the likes of Ford, which broke up even before the election. And still, the major parties that went in, Ford Kenya and Ford Asili, still disintegrated because you're out of power. You don't have political power. You're in the opposition benches. And as a British member of parliament once said, there's nothing to be gained in being in the opposition. Every politician must aspire to be in power.
Indeed.
That is the purpose of going to politics.
Absolutely.
And what about Uhuru Kenyatta, the president? So he shows up, or shall I say they show up at State House, and then that's Mariga, I beg your pardon, and then the rest of the Jubilee, Tanga, some people would call them, and then the president takes this kofia, the famous image that then is shared very, very quickly on social media, and then he goes quiet, like it's almost like someone was saying that his support was capped at that moment, because he never did anything else, never said anything else. The following day, literally the following day, Maina Commander shows up at Capitol Hill and then says, well, I'm going to support the handshake candidate. So Uhuru endorses, so we are told, Mariga. And then right after that, Maina Commander, who had been going around the country supposedly in the president's name on this Kielewek, I think, because he kept saying that, we are speaking for the president and that sort of thing. And then he actually endorses in broad daylight. I mean, it rarely happens in this country. People usually behave in a manner likely to suggest. But for someone to come to a press conference where the sole objective is to announce that I'm actually going to support the candidate of the other party, that was quite unprecedented in some
What I
ways
found even interesting is that this is a Jubilee-nominated member of parliament.
Yes.
He owes his allegiance to the party leader.
To the party.
Yes.
To the party and the party leader.
Yes.
The party leader less than 24 hours previously saying this, or not saying, because we don't remember any soundbite from President Uhuru Kenyatta or any statement that he made indicating his support for Mariga, but we saw photos. What happened there remains, you know, a lot of stories have been said about how they got there, what happened, and so on and so forth. That Kofia has a lot of stories to tell. But ordinarily, President Uhuru Kenyatta is somebody who speaks for himself. He says things. I would have expected probably that day he would say, this is my preferred candidate in Kibra, I support him, and so on and so forth. The fact that he didn't, and Commander went and said something else.
That's a good place to take a break. We'll be going back to Kibra live, monitoring events there just to know what's going to happen. Is there going to be some kind of concession, announcement, or anything that gives us an idea? As you can see, there are live pictures, people waiting there at the tallying center there at the NCC Hall in Kibra, not too far away from Ngong Road, the ODM brigade there. We can see John Mbadi there. I think I saw Rosa Buyu there, if I'm not wrong. Quite a number of them. By the way, I was told that all those MPs, each one of them was in charge of a polling center. But we'll see what happens there in the next few minutes. Let's take that break very quickly. We'll be right back.